we have like 20 minutes to cover like a weeks long of stuff, but we thought about doing this because you know, Jeroen is at GetSocial, and they focus primarily on kind of viral growth. So you know, we're seeing this huge growth in UA. So, but kind of like viral features that were super common in casual games for, you know, for the past decade are kind of not being utilized as heavy. And you know, it'd be nice to get a refresher on, you know, those developments. So maybe start. So Kate kind of introed you a little bit, but maybe get us up to speed, you know, from Spill to GetSocial, and then like what does GetSocial do?
So I was at Spill until 2013. So I've always been in kind of the media and entertainment business. I started out at Universal. Actually, one of the first things I did for Universal Music was develop games for artists, specifically for Eminem, Papa Roach, and Limp Bizkit.
Nice.
The Limp Bizkit game was so offensive to our North American mother company that we were never allowed to release it because there was copious amounts of drug use and alcohol abuse whilst driving a car. It was like a side-scrolling racing game. That they never signed off on the game, so that kind of went down the toilet. But I was kind of bitten by the game development bug. So from Universal to Spill, where I licensed games for their web and mobile divisions. Then sidestepped into Google and YouTube, and now back at GetSocial. And what we do is effectively, if you think about really successful mobile applications, right? I'm not talking about games. I'm talking about Facebook. Snapchat, well, maybe Snapchat not anymore. But Facebook, LinkedIn, those kind of platforms, and you think about the first thing that these guys do when you sign up to the platform is they ask you, one, do you agree to our privacy terms and conditions? And two, who else do you know? Who else can you invite to connect on this platform? And the reason they do that is very simple, because they know that the more people you connect with, the more valuable their platform is going to be and the longer you're going to retain. And the technical term for that is network effects. And we want to, at GetSocial, we want to enable developers to tap into those network effects without necessarily being locked into the Facebook ecosystem.
Cool, okay, so you're sort of emulating that,
Yes.
what you described, that kind of immediate funnel. So this experience that Jeroen has just puts him in a good position to kind of cover some of these topics while still staying somewhat independent. So let's talk about user acquisition through viral first, specifically about like referrals. So you know, back in the good old King days where you could spam your friends, yeah, the Zynga days, you could just, you know, my Facebook feed was people asking for hearts for, you know, Farmville or whatever. So, but that's tough to do now. So can you tell us a bit more about like kind of referrals and then your experience with rewarded referrals?
Yeah, so I mean, like Zynga was probably one of the very first ones to do it, like friend gating. Right? You can have the tractor if you invite 3 friends. And last time I checked, right before I closed down my Facebook account, I had 700 or 800 unopened Candy Crush invitations. Right? So this mechanic was super successful. Problem is that the Facebook platform acts in the best interest of Facebook and not necessarily in the best interest of developers. So February this year, Facebook closed down app invites, which was their kind of organic way to grow users. You could very easily, through Facebook, invite your friends to install the application. They gave developers 90 days notice, so they told everyone in November that come February, this is going to stop working. And it was really, like, app invites were very successful. Then Cambridge Analytica happened, and overnight Facebook closed the invitable friend graph API. So what that was is that function inside Facebook where you would log in with Facebook inside a game. It would pull up a list of all your friends, and with the push of a button, it would invite all those friends. Now that mechanic is both highly effective and highly overused because you're inviting 700 of your friends to a game. Right? That 700 people list of friends includes your mom and your grandmother and all that kind of stuff. So it's not very effective. So we are strong believers in a more personal form of invitations, and actually the numbers that we see across the games that we work with bear that out. Personal platforms like WhatsApp, like SMS, like Instagram Direct, Snapchat, VK, Viber, you name it, they all have significantly higher conversion percentages than you would see from kind of more public shares that you would do to Facebook.
Cool. What about, so one of the topics that we talked about before this was rewarded referrals. So it's like, you know, invite this friend to get X. So it's, do you think it's kind of like a replacement for IAP or like a rewarded video, this referral? And examples of like how it works.
Yeah, so it can be, right? So when you think about sharing, sharing information is a basic human need. It's a basic human form of interaction. It's currency for us. And where in the dark ages or even before, it was about, you know, which berries are safe to eat and, you know, what does a bear scat look like. Now it's, you know, what Netflix series am I going to binge or what game am I going to play on the way to work? So that kind of information is currency within our social circles. But it still helps if you nudge people to do the right thing, right? To share about your game. And rewarded referrals is one way of doing that. You have to kind of think through the referral mechanism, right? So one, don't reward the installer because Apple's going to yank you from the App Store. But also you want to make sure that you communicate your reward to the player that's doing the inviting, to the referrer. And one of the ways you can do that is through currency rewards, right? So you give someone a reward, diamonds or gold or something else, but you can also give someone intangible rewards, like the benefit of playing a game with friends or the increased enjoyment of playing a game with friends. If you have a multiplayer game, it's going to inherently be more fun if you have friends that you can beat compared to perfect strangers.
Cool. So, any examples that you've seen recently where they've added, the company's added that feature?
Yeah, so we have, speaking from our customers, but we have pretty much all of our customers use rewarded referrals in one form or another. We had one company where it's an idle questing game based around cats. For some reason, quite a few of our customers have games based around cats.
Right.
But they had a unique a unique hero that you could unlock if you invited X amount of friends. And their amount of installs doubled by 14, or not doubled, but were multiplied by 14 times installs through social. So that's quite significant. And in other cases where it was non-rewarded before, and then it was rewarded was implemented after, you can easily double, but more likely 10x the amount of invites you're sending out.
And you also mentioned that the text that's part of the request is important.
Yeah, so it's as game developers or people into gaming, it's, you know, we want to talk about our games as, oh, this is amazing, this game is awesome, and in fact our standard invite text is come play X with me, it's awesome. Come play this game, it's awesome. One of our developers changed the text to will you please come play this game with me, which is much more personal, but it also kind of sounds like begging. But it generated 20% more installs.
That's cool. Just by changing text. Just
by changing the text.
And
We had another one that so you can't reward the installer. But what they did is they said, well, come and play this game and you get 300 gold and a rare hero. But that wasn't actually a reward for installing the game. That was just what you get completing the tutorial. So it's like they gave you something they promised you something you were already getting for free, but it worked. It increased their conversion by 300%.
Nice. And I think the last thing about kind of this is, you mentioned the viral funnel, because there's a viral formula. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the
K-score.
Yeah, so the K-factor is kind of the measure of virality, right? And it's the amount of invites sent times conversion kind of gets you your K-factor. It's a very simple formula, but there's a lot of moving parts to it because there's all these ways you can influence both the amount of invites sent and the conversion percentage. And that's something that, you know, you do through testing, but also through following a bunch of steps that, you know, we kind of outline for our customers.
And then what genres have you seen in the past 12 months that adding referral has helped?
So counterintuitively, idle games do really well with referrals. It's kind of weird because an idle game is the very definition of a single player game. It's barely a game, right, technically. but it works really well, and we have quite a few customers with idle games, and mechanics that they've implemented that work really well are, for instance, giving a boost on your idle output for every friend that connects to the game. So idle output is the one thing that is important in an idle game, and if you can boost that by inviting friends, we've seen players are much more likely to actually invite their friends and share, to the point where they're out-sharing multiplayer games by a factor like 2 to 1.
Cool. So let's talk about retention, which is really important. So, and I want to talk beyond core gameplay. So we have a game that has good retention. What features, kind of social features, can we add that will give us a slight nudge? So I think the first thing on my list is like maybe some kind of chat or notification system. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so chat's great. The one thing with chat is that because it's so fleeting, there's a high opportunity for toxicity. Because people feel like they can get away with anything because their message scrolls off the screen in seconds. We have customers using an activity feed, which is more like a forum. So if you have a message and somebody responds, it gets threaded in. That has several benefits. One, it's more permanent, so people can have an actual lasting discussion about gameplay elements or a lasting discussion about clan politics with an activity feed. It's also less toxic because the message is there for longer, so it's easier to reduce toxicity. And we see that players that interact with the activity feed have, I think the number was 600% higher day 30 retention. Okay,
that's cool. Any more examples about how a good placement of something like an activity feed, having maybe an offline forum or a community, has helped some game grow?
Yeah, so we have quite a few. So there's a couple things in social, right? So one of the things is the ability to connect players together and to connect people to their friends. Facebook does that through their social graph, and there are ways that you can do this as a developer through friend lists and stuff like that. Our data shows that players that are connected with at least 2 more players inside the game have a 70% higher lifetime retention compared to average. So that's quite significant. When it comes to activity feeds, there are a bunch of different ways that developers can use them. So a great example for frequently used like multiplayer retention mechanics is for clans, right? So you have an activity feed for your clan where clan members can talk. They can pass gifts or resources back and forth. They can plan which clan they will annihilate next, etc. That works really well. But also from a customer support point of view, having like a global feed, we have quite a few of our developers that do that. They have a global feed for their game where, as a developer, they post news, they interact with their community, like what content updates should we do next, what should be nerfed, what should be buffed, etc. And what our developers find is that a lot of their customer support is reduced significantly because the community ends up providing support. So if they have a user that has a question, I can't figure this out, 9 out of 10 times it's been answered by the community before one of their moderators can get to it.
Let's stay on the topic of clans, because I think that's, especially in hyper-casual, something that's completely missing. The idea that players are playing together these games that maybe are not playable together. Maybe more about experience with clans, and especially with events. That's something we talked about.
Yeah, so one of the things that we have a game called Crush Them All. It's an idle RPG, and they have a clan system where every week or every couple of days there's a clan event where you have to work together to beat bosses, because you can never beat them on your own. So kind of every member of the clan kind of whittles them down, and as they get destroyed, you unlock rewards for every member of the clan that participated. And that for them works really well, and the clan engagement mechanic there is really well done. The other thing you see with clans, and I think Clash of Clans is a good example for that, is when people get to end game content, it becomes less about the content and more about the clan and the connections you have there. So people will stay longer inside a game, they'll spend money, not because they don't have that specific unit yet or whatever, but because they feel they owe it to the clan. To kind of keep up and keep busy, to interact with the friends that they've made inside the clan and to help them out. And I think that's a really powerful mechanic that hyper casual could learn something from.
Is there like case study on the success that adding a clan system has on retention that you can share?
On clans?
Or events?
On events, definitely. So what we see is that users that, obviously, like this is limited to what we see, but users that use push notifications and activity feeds to promote in-game events like tournaments and things like that, that can significantly impact your overall retention rate.
Cool. Okay. So we have a few minutes left, and all of this stuff sounds amazing and great, but I wanted to understand, for a small team, implementing some of these things, like how does that look? How long does it take to do all that stuff? So let's say that we're using your solution or just, doing it ourselves. Maybe can you talk about some of the potential issues with implementing and then getting results, or getting results that you can read properly?
So 2 lines of codes in 10 minutes, right? That's every SDK. Fuck that. No, so like if you want to do this, you want to do it well, it's going to take time. You should budget, whether you're using our solution or somebody else's, or worst case scenario, building it yourself. I wouldn't, but then again, that's what we do. It's going to take you several days, because you have to factor in, the UI, whether you build your own or use one that comes supplied with the solution. You have to think about how it ties into your game and where it ties into your game, right? You want to make sure that the moments that you're calling on your players to share are the moments when your player is high on your game. It doesn't make sense to ask me to share something if I just got annihilated, right? Unless it's a way for me to get revenge. What I want to share is when I win, when I score, when I hit the jackpot in a slots game, when I beat someone's high score. And we actually have games that kind of use that mechanic where they are inviting, as a player, I invite my friend to try and beat my score. And then because of the way that deep linking works, they get linked completely into the game to the level with the same seed and the same upgrades that I had available when I played, and they can try and beat my score. My score is actually ticking down in the top left of the screen. So it's those kinds of mechanics, and that stuff that takes time to implement. It's not like integrating an ad SDK.
And then for results, do you think, will you see immediate, or should you wait 2 weeks, a month?
You'll see results depending on how you surface the mechanic. You'll see results fairly quickly. So we've had customers where it took a full 45 to 50 minutes of continuous play before the actual sharing mechanism was exposed to their users. In a casual game, you're talking about day 2, right? At which point you've already lost, 60% of your users, if not way more. So you want to get that mechanic in front of the user fairly early on. But you should measure virality from the point where your users can meaningfully interact with it. You should be able to see results fairly quickly. And one thing that we found is that users who are early in the life cycle of your game, so closer to launch, are significantly more viral, like 8 times more viral than users that you get when your game has been on the market for 3 to 6 months.
Interesting. I think the last thing before we go to questions is, like, okay, you've mentioned idle games. What kind of modern genres besides idle games do you think having some of these things we talked about would be beneficial?
I mean, like we have games all over the spectrum, right? So we have slot machine games, which don't really strike you as social, right? Sitting behind a slot machine is generally a very singular experience. Idle games, we have multiplayer racing games, we have esports games. Any game where you can, ideally where you can meaningfully interact with other players is perfect for rewarded sharing and mechanics like it. But even slot machine games, which kind of defy that definition, we're seeing really, really good results with some of our customers. Cool.
So yeah, let's open it up to the audience to give you some tough questions.
So just to rephrase the question is how you communicate about the incentive received for installing the game and whether that's ethical or not. There's no question, nobody's being misled here, right? Because you're getting exactly what's in that message when you install the game. So, but even the morality behind it, it's your friend saying, hey, if you download this game, you'll get this. You're gonna get it inside the game. You have no use for it outside of the game. somebody isn't promising you 1/10 of a Bitcoin to download this game. It's something that you use inside the game that makes your experience better. Whether you would have gotten it if you followed their link or not, I don't think is super relevant.
And in my experience, users tend to not complain about that stuff. So you never get feedback about it.
Thank you.
Well, there it goes. Okay, anyone else? While you guys are thinking, I wanted to ask Jeroen, just like, you know, in the last 12 months, what's like kind of like the best piece of advice that you've heard about for studios seeking growth?
Jesus. And prayer is not the answer.
Yeah.
No, it's like the thing is there's so many moving parts. I think the main thing is when you try to implement stuff that impacts growth is to implement it one step at a time, right? So don't go out and implement 5 things altogether, because you won't be able to figure out where your actual growth is coming from or where the viral contribution to your growth is coming from. And then make sure that going into it, you've defined what it is that you want to grow, what it is that you want to measure, and how you're going to measure that. And make sure that you have the business partners or the technology to do so.
Cool.
What do you think about the current status of App Store optimization?
Sorry, the
App Store optimization.
App Store optimization. So that topic is definitely not part of my expertise. I think app stores in general, the feedback at least that I'm hearing in the market is, whilst there's been a lot of changes to the app stores in general to try to highlight more games, the overall impact of getting featured in the app store is declining. And like anecdotal evidence from our customers that did get featured recently as opposed to 12 or 18 months ago show that, you know, those numbers have significantly reduced. The numbers, the organic traffic apocalypse that hit the Play Store earlier this year, you know, developers I talked to are still recovering from that. So I think that it is unwise to put all your eggs in one basket, right? Whether that basket is paid UA, organic, or viral growth, what matters is making sure that you have a mix, a responsible mix of all of those, and tracking how that mix performs to make sure you emphasize what makes sense for you and for your studio and for your game at that time.
All right, cool. So, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks for such interesting insights.